My guest today is enterprise and big data expert Lloyd Marino. Now, Lloyd's CEO of Avetta Capital, and he is one hell of a great guy. He's a fellow Metal member, and it's amazing. I think if you went and picked the most popular guy at Metal, apart from Ken Rakowski, you'd probably come up with Lloyd Marino. He's a great guy. He'll do anything for anybody. He's super, and he's worked with companies like Expedia, Visa, and the US government, creating big data solutions. He brings to the table a quarter century of experience working in senior management roles, including Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Officer for various organisations ranging from emerging growth startups to Fortune 500 companies. Lloyd Marino is one very smart duck. And I'll be back with Lloyd immediately after this break on the Voice America Business Channel.
Do you want your business to achieve results you never thought possible? Bob Pritchard is recognized as the Business Leader's Advisor and has 30 years of experience as a straight-talking troubleshooter for Fortune 500 companies and SMEs across the world. Whether you need a checkup across all departments of your business or simply want to improve marketing, advertising, performance measurement, or some other area, Bob Pritchard will work his magic so you can blow away your competition. Bob Pritchard is also one of the most in-demand speakers in the world. Over 1,500 clients on 5 continents and countless standing ovations are a testament to how he changes the fortunes of business. Pick up Bob's new book, Kick-Ass Business and Marketing Secrets, at your nearest bookstore, or visit Bob's website at www.bobpritchard.com. Remember, if you want to be successful, call Bob Pritchard now. Worldwide phone numbers and more information can be found at bobpritchard.com. You are listening to the Bob Pritchard Radio Show. To connect with Bob, please send an email to bob@bobpritchard.com. That's bob@bobpritchard.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Bob Pritchard Straight Talking Radio Show, where we give you an insight into the lives of some of the world's most interesting business people, the services that they provide, and we try to work out what it is that makes them tick. Now, it's extremely difficult to create a successful business. We look at the failure rates of something around 97%. So it's obvious that we entrepreneurs and business people need all the help we can get. And that's why I urge you every week to ensure that you've got terrific mentors and to read as much as you can and to watch as many business programs as you can to and take on board the advice that works for you, that fits your environment. Now, we hear the term big data everywhere these days. It appears to be the solution to a myriad of problems in almost every industry. It's been around for a fair while, and on the surface, it seems simple enough. Collect as much data as you can from as many people as possible, analyze it and collate it, and presto, it produces the most effective and efficient solution to any problem. Easy. Well, to obtain a simple solution, the application is extremely complex. Big data is being used by cities, and these are the ones we can understand, to determine traffic routes, public transport schedules, how to get 100,000 people away from a major sporting event, for those sorts of things. But how does small business or even medium-sized business use big data? Now, my guest today is enterprise and big data expert Lloyd Marino. He's the CEO of Avetta Avetta Global, he's a hell of a great guy. He's a fellow Metal member, and he's worked with companies like Expedia, Visa, and the US government to create big data solutions. Lloyd is regarded as a tech whisperer, a true master at translating and communicating Byzantine technical processes that elude even the savviest business minds into language that they can grasp. Now, Lloyd's equally conversant in the languages of business and technology. Therefore, senior executives on both the management and the tech sides of today's data-dependent marketplace regularly call on him to solve problems, complex problems that are data-driven. Lloyd brings to the table a quarter century of experience working in senior management roles, including Services Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Officer for various organisations ranging from emerging growth startups to Fortune 500 companies. Hi, mate. Welcome to the Bob Pritchard Radio Show.
Hey, Bob. Great to be here.
You don't look that old. So how did you get a quarter of a century of this high-level experience behind you? You started when you were 3.
Yeah, I literally, this is what I've been doing my entire life. I've been in technology my entire career, starting when I was about 17 when I started my first company. And then shortly thereafter, worked my way up into the corporate world and found my way into travel technologies at the ripe age of about 22.
Right.
I just turned 47, so.
Oh, did you? You don't look that old, I've got to tell you. So you're doing well. Now,
I appreciate it.
How did you? What took you into the technology area? Because 25 years ago, it wasn't the hot, hip, happening thing that it is now, was it?
It's true. I actually grew up in South Florida in the Boca Raton area. My father was a senior staff engineer at Motorola, and so I've always been quite involved in engineering. But growing up in that area, IBM and Motorola both had big presence there, and so I actually got into technology because of my father. He would check out computers, kind of like library books, because he was an engineer. And while he was away at work, I was at home fiddling around with these wonderful machines and just had a knack for it. And I've been doing it ever since.
It was close to Motorola and IBM, but it's also not that far away from the beach.
Very true.
So you're a studious kind of guy rather than a surfer kind of guy.
I'm actually a little bit of both.
Oh, you're good. Work-life balance is critical. Okay, you talk about the 5 biggest questions that every CEO needs to know before diving into big data. Let's talk about the first question that a CEO needs to know, I guess. What type of data do they need to collect? I know that depends on what the company does, but how does the CEO qualify what information he needs? Right now, we can find out every single thing almost about everybody. So if you've got a company doing a specific thing, how do you determine which information is beneficial to collect and which is just going to clog up the system?
Yeah, and that really depends on what purpose the CEO has in order to drive the business forward. So typically what you see in a small to medium-sized business is they want to use social data to drive marketing efforts, right? They want to collect a bunch of social media information about an individual to figure out what their buying habits are. Now, for a small to medium-sized business, that could be a very expensive proposition. And therefore, you really need to have a purpose. What are you going to do with that data once you collect it? You've got to have a game plan.
Right.
So that's kind of the biggest takeaway from that particular topic is, as a CEO, if you're going to embark on collecting big data or drive the business using big data, you've got to have a purpose for that information, especially if it's around marketing and social media. In some cases, what you find out, you got to be careful of what you wish for. Sometimes what CEOs find out is that their products that are on the market aren't very well received, in the social world. And so, you've got to have a purpose.
Well, that's still great information because it enables you to at least take action and do something about it, right? So, and until you gather the information, is it possible to sort of detail what it is that's going to be of benefit to you if you don't really know what's out there?
Well, again, if you have a purpose, then you have an actual path on which to take in order to gather the information that you need to get to that purpose. So, like you mentioned earlier, all that information is pretty much readily available on the internet. In fact, what you're starting to see are companies creating data sets about individuals. Here are a block of individuals that like coffee. We've got a data set of 50 million. Here's a data set of individuals who like this particular widget. And you're starting to see these data sets become readily available. So they're out there. But if you don't have a purpose for them, then they really mean nothing to you.
Right. So now the second question is, I guess, can you monetize the results that you get from this big data? But I guess the second question is, do you always have to monetize it? I mean, and is monetizing it a short-term proposition, or is it benefits that will accrue to the company over a long term, or is it all of the above?
It's a little bit of both. I always tell an organization, a small and medium-sized business, if you're going to embark on big data, I think, and this is a personal opinion, I think the best way to do that is look internally first. Collect data about your organization, about how your own business practices are happening. Look internally first. A lot of the times what you'll see is an organization that has, for example, an IT staff that says, "Hey, God, boss, we need to get on the big data bandwagon. We need to start doing all this stuff." And you're selfishly saying that because IT departments, let's be honest, they want to better their resumes. They want to work on the latest and greatest gadgets.
Yeah.
And they wind up forcing an organization to potentially spend money unnecessarily on technologies that they wouldn't necessarily need. Again, it goes back to having a purpose. So if you had a purpose to actually drive that big data, and for example, looking internally, are our processes and procedures streamlined? Are we looking at things in the right manner? Is our current way of doing things a modern way of doing things? Are we using the right tools? And what business leaders find out by looking internally first is they find out that their ecosystem is potentially either not very streamlined or, worst case scenario, just broken. There's always a process from beginning to end, and if there's something off in the middle, even just a little bit, you could have yourself a bit of a problem.
Is that how does that? I'm just struggling with this a bit. How does that qualify for big data? I mean, 25 years ago, we marketers would do a sort of an audit of the business and look at every element of the company from the front door to the back door and work out what was working and what wasn't and what needed better technology and what didn't and where the gaps were in your staff and et cetera, et cetera. Why is it different now than it was then? Or is it the same with a different name?
It's the same with a different name. I mean, I think if you look at the word big data in general, it's kind of it's very misleading.
Yeah.
So there are not a lot of companies out there that have big data, contrary to popular belief. Big data is you're talking about massive amounts of information that use specialized equipment and specialized software to crunch numbers.
Yes.
And a lot of companies say, "Oh, we're doing big data. We're doing big data." You're not doing big data. You have a lot of data, but you're not doing big data. So if you're really thinking in terms of small business to medium-sized business, what you're really talking about is analytics. You're not talking about big data. You're talking about relational databases. You're talking about a way of understanding the numbers that you actually do have. Right. And internally nowadays, you have CRM systems, you have ERP systems, even small companies. So they do collect a fair amount of data that they can internalize and analyze. And so that's what I mean by those process, finding gaps, as you put it, gap analysis, and for me, looking at the word analysis, that kind of lends itself to analyzing data. And so when you look internally and look at your process and procedures and look at how sales is doing their job all the way down to manufacturing, there's a lot of information that you can crunch there, and there are a lot of gaps you could potentially find in order to clean up your ecosystem.
Okay, I've been working with a group out of South America that is using big data. They're an insurance group, and they pull all this information in and determine people's socioeconomic groups, their ages, what they're buying, what they're not buying, what insurance coverage they might need, and what they don't. Then it's analysed, and it sort of spits out that Mary Smith fits this pattern, and she's likely to buy a Rolex watch. Probably not that likely to buy a Rolex watch in Latin America, but nevertheless. And then they use location-based marketing to determine where they're shopping and to drive them to buy certain things, and then they can text them and say, have you got your watch insured? If not, push here. That's what I imagine to be the typical use of big data to identify people's buying patterns, their travelling patterns, how often they go to the local mall, what's in the local mall, and how do you drive them to buy a particular thing. Is that not the most likely application of big data?
It's definitely the most popular area of big data when it comes to educating the marketplace.
Right.
There's a lot of big data happening, and you mentioned it kind of on the forefront of this, is in government, for example, weather patterns, traffic patterns. Those are real big data applications. It's not to say that marketing or advertising side of it is not real, but in my mind, there's a difference. There's applications for big data that tackle real world problems, and then there's applications for big data that basically you and I volunteer. We are the actual product, so we're Google's product because they're collecting tons of information about our behavior. Right. We're the insurance company's potential product because they're collecting a lot of information about our behavior, and you and I opt into that. We freely give that information in order to get something back. But you're right. That is kind of the most popular big data application, and a lot of this target marketing or this location-based marketing is getting really, really complex. And getting very popular. And this is opening the door to the Internet of Things, the IoT, as you start to say.
Yeah. So if I'm a medium-sized business and I want to use big data in that way, would I set up my own internal processes, or would I simply hire companies that do all of that from woe to go and have the technology and continual updating the technology, etc.?
Typically, you would want to outsource it. You want to cloud base it because the computing power needed to actually do real big data is quite hefty, and so you get better economies of scale if you went to the cloud and bought your services from someone like an AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft Azure platform. But typically a small, medium-sized business, I always recommend that if they're going to embark on collecting information and big data, start small. Look at demographics or sociographic information. Start collecting small data sets about behavior. Again, because this goes back to the idea of introducing that into your ecosystem, getting your employees kind of used to the concept of realizing the information that they're getting and being able to take action on it. So there's 3 A's of big data, in my opinion. You got to analyze it, you got to automate it, and you have to take action on it.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. So, again, I have a confusion in my mind. And, when you talk about big data, you're recommending that companies start small. Isn't that a contradiction? I mean, if you're going out there to get information, or are you talking about doing that through segmenting the market so that you're only getting a lot of data about a small part of your overall business? Or what do you mean by start small? Start small with big data seems to me to be a contradiction, because you're getting this wealth of information pouring in. And I guess the lead-on question from that is, if I've got all this information coming in and I've got somebody else doing it and they're doing the analytics, does it really matter whether I start small or go the whole hog, apart from the financial aspect?
Yeah, I think it does. Again, you want to kind of evolve your big data department, if you will. So if you had a data scientist on board in your organization, or you outsource it, the resulting information that you gather. So let's say, when I say start small, I said demographics. Collect demographic information about your customer base. Well, if your customer base is 1 million people, it's a fairly large data set on one particular category.
Yeah.
And so once you figure that out and you take action on it, now you know what to do with it. So, for example, you may find out that most of your customers are located in a very small demographic. Maybe they're all in West Texas, for example,
right,
or a good portion of them. Well, that just gave you a result. Now you realize that a lot of your efforts either have to be concentrated in West Texas to keep your customer base, or you could figure out from there, why is West Texas the biggest customer base? Well, it's because we have a sales staff there that really is kicking butt. So maybe we need to take our efforts in our other locations and double them up, or learn from what's been happening in West. So once you have that resulting data set, now you can do something with it. So you go to the next step. And this is what I mean, by taking action, and you just keep repeating that process. So you do demographics, then maybe the next step is you look at a different market, you target a different audience of people, you figure out what the resulting set is from there, and then you keep the process going. And then ultimately you have what is real-time big data information.
How often does big data turn up totally surprising results that catch companies off guard, that they find out information that they about their business that they had never realized?
Quite often, especially if you do an internal kind of analytics exercise, a lot of the time business leaders find out that their staff isn't as automated as they thought they were. So processes and procedures are happening quite manually as opposed to in an automated fashion. So what typically happens is they get their inner workings or their inner ecosystem more automated and more reliant on the automation of data. And then externally, I'll give you an example. One of our clients is a advertising firm. And I don't know if you ever walk down the city streets of New York or even here in Los Angeles, and you see construction sites that are just plastered with posters.
Yep.
And so typically, and the thought is, and near the bottom of the barrel, an advertising company has money left over, and they say, well, we want our product on the streets. Let's pay for this. And what people think is happening is that people are walking by, looking at these posters, and then they start collecting data on who's actually looking through a technology. We called it Eyes On. It's a camera technology that actually can see who's looking at these posters.
Right.
And what happened is, in certain areas, nobody's looking at these posters. And that was very surprising to this advertising company, that people are just simply walking by and not realizing there's advertising there. So it's very surprising. Now, had they make that information public to their customers, they wouldn't really have a customer base. So, it caused them to kind of pivot and to look at other areas of revenue. and as well make the constituents who are walking by a little more apt to look at the advertising that's going on. So, of course, when you do sound and do lights and do other things that make things more compelling for the individuals who walk by to look.
That's interesting, because advertising agencies for years have kept secret the fact that nobody watches their bloody television ads. So I don't know why they'd want people looking at their posters. So I reckon if I went to 90% of my clients are all small to medium-sized businesses, and if I went along to 99% of my clients and said, you should begin to take advantage of the big data opportunities that are out there, I reckon 99 out of every 100 would look at me and say, well, what do I do? Where do I start? How do I go about it? I know absolutely nothing about this. So what do you tell them? What's the answer to that question?
Well, this is why companies hire us. But
well, is that what they need to do? They need to look for somebody like yourself or yourself to go in and do it all for them.
Yeah, I think it helps. I think it helps to have someone in the industry who can tell you what's available to you. But if you're savvy enough, and to be quite candid, a lot of business leaders are really focused on sales. They're focused on financials. There's this huge gap. I actually wrote a book about bridging the gap between business leaders and technology folks. There is this kind of huge gap where the business leader kind of puts his hand out and says, look, I don't understand that stuff. I don't understand technology. I don't know what a server is. I don't care. I just want it to work. And that's a really short-sighted approach, in my opinion. And of course, I'm biased. I'm in technology. So, but doing this as many years as I have, I've noticed that most business leaders are still kind of hands-off when it comes to the technology stuff, and they really rely on their IT staff or the most savvy technical person in the organization to make those decisions. And in today's economic society, you just simply can't do that anymore. You're the business leader. You need to understand this stuff because it is your job to drive your business forward. So to educate yourself on what big data is, on what information is available to you, it behooves you and your organization. But to get to answer the question, it really is start small when it comes to looking at big data. And it's kind of the wrapping everything we've talked about together. It's have a purpose for it. What are you going to do with it? Start small so that you can grow methodically about collecting information and understand what it is you're collecting. And again, just take action on it. Use it over and over and over, and automate as much as possible so that you don't have a lot of manual intervention involved.
The CEO of any business, no matter whether it's small or large, has a very complicated path to walk, don't they? They've got dozens and dozens of different disciplines that they have to be across and that have to work in order for the company to be successful. So isn't technology one area where you are really better off leaving it to someone who is an expert, who has been in it for 25 years? For example, I drive a Mercedes, something goes wrong with it. I can either take it to a technician who really understands this stuff, or I can go out and buy a set of wrenches. And I reckon my car would run a lot better with a mechanic than with my wrenches. Isn't it the same sort of thing, that it's such a complex and rapidly changing area that it's extremely difficult for a CEO that's worried about HR, he's worried about financials, he may be worried about reporting quarterly results, he's worried about operations and sales and marketing, etc. Isn't technology the one area that he really is better off leaving it to an expert?
I get this question quite a bit, especially from business leaders, where they're saying, look, I just don't have the time to understand these things. And my answer is always, you don't have to understand it at a technical level. You just have to understand it from a business perspective and what the impact is on your business. I'll give you an example. Oftentimes you hear that, or an IT staff will say, we have to upgrade. We have to get new servers. We have to modernize. We have to do all these things. And a lot of the times the IT staff is looking at doing it for the sake of doing it so they're on the latest and greatest platforms, not understanding what impact it's going to have for the business. And so if you're a business leader and you say, okay, I hear you, IT staff. I hear that you want to upgrade to the latest version of Windows, for example. Shouldn't you know that there is a potential, especially if you're running custom or specialized software, that doing an upgrade might impact your business? You might find out that your software doesn't work with that. Your line of business software doesn't necessarily work with that latest and greatest version of a product. And so you really have to understand how this stuff is going to impact your business. And I'll give you an example. There's a product out there called WriteFax, and it's an automated faxing system. We had a law firm who used this just constantly. Right. Their lawyers would sit at their desk. They would fax out these things right from their computer. They wouldn't have to get up and print it out and feed it into a fax machine. It was an automated faxing system. Well, the IT staff decided they were going to upgrade everyone from Windows XP to Windows 7. And so they did. And they got about halfway through, and they started getting these complaints that, our WriteFax system doesn't work. Well, lo and behold, it wasn't compatible with the latest version of Windows 7 unless they purchased the upgrade. So now they're looking at they already made one big leap and a huge expense to do that. Now they've got to take another big leap and another expense in software in order just to get the latest. So what was the bottom line? Did it really help the business? And it did not. And the bottom line is it didn't help productivity at all. What it did was it's just a huge expense for the organization. So that's an extreme example, but it comes down to, again, the business leader, instead of just saying, do what you want, I don't understand this stuff, it is a very practical way of saying, all right, how is this upgrade going to impact our organization? And what are the effects? Are you sure none of the software is going to be affected by doing this? And I equate, you equated this to being a mechanic, and there's a lot of similarities there where you just trust that your mechanic is going to, tell you that what is wrong with your car is actually what's wrong with your car, as opposed to saying, oh, by the way, your timing, we need a new timing belt on this car, even though you came in for brakes. Yeah. And you're not going to know the better, right? You wouldn't know whether or not he's telling you a lie or telling you the truth. So, understanding it at some level, you don't have to understand how to replace a timing belt, but you may have to understand that, I just did that a year and a half ago. I'm not going to do it again. There's no way.
Isn't the difference, though, that one's a contractor, the other one is somebody on staff who you pay a lot of money to be a specialist in the technology area, and if they don't give you the right advice, you fire their ass?
But how do you know they're giving you the right advice?
Yeah, well, you have to trust it, but how do you yeah, okay. Now, so if you're gathering and analysing big data, do I now need a whole floor of mathematical wizards to be able to interpret this stuff and work out how I can use it and monetize it?
Potentially, and this is why I often tell business leaders they need to start small, because if you're not getting a return on your investment, if you're investing in big data and the results aren't yielding some return on investment, if you're not able to monetize those results, then why do it in the first place?
Yep.
So again, if you go through the cycle of rinse and repeat, the 3 A's, if you automate and analyze and you take action and you continue to evolve that ecosystem, eventually it should pay for itself and hopefully make you money, and allow you to understand your customer, allow you to understand your business, and all kinds of.
Okay, well, we're out of time, but I must admit that you've convinced me that when my clients want to look at big data, I need to get on the phone to Lloyd Marino and bring him in, because it's beyond my level of comprehension, and I suspect that it's beyond the level of comprehension of most CEOs, or certainly the ones that I deal with. Lloyd, thanks very much for speaking with me on the Bob Pritchard Radio Show. And if you'd like to know more about Lloyd Marino and Avetta Global, AVETTA Global, go to avettaglobal.com. And I'll be back with more of the Bob Pritchard Radio Show on Voice America Business after this short